which is essentially the same thing. When you get an extreme area of gravity, you get a bend in space. And what is space? Space is nothing. So how do you bend nothing? And if you get a whole lot of gravity, way much more than that, in a confined area, you don't just bend space, you actually punch a hole in it. So how do you punch a hole in nothing? Now these people will understand or perfectly accept that concept, but not when it challenges the idea that they were created by a spell of abracadabra and a golem arrangement.
The other thing I've noticed, Arn, is that there are, for every scientific fact that has been a major advance in human history, human scientific history, there's a denialist for it. So I would never have guessed that there were germ theory denialists, but there are. I mean, they're on TV. Yeah. They're in control of the media, and some of the people we like. I mean, everyone liked Bill Maher. I liked Bill Maher. I thought he was funny. I thought he was insightful. But he's anti-Western medicine. He's anti-scientific progress.
Mute your microphone for a second, please, Eric. Thank you.
So it's very upsetting to see the prevalence of people who have decided to reject what is essentially scientific reality.
I must agree with that, because I was a big fan of Bill Maher until I realised that he was a denialist. It was a bit of a shame, really, because he seems so sensible in many other areas. Oh, you were about to say something.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that I'm often told that we science-minded people will all band together and we will all support everything that the other says. And if one of us is caught in a compromised situation where our facts aren't straight or something like that, that everyone else will rally to cover it up in the smoke screens. And the fact of it is, if any of us says anything wrong, if we've actually gotten our data wrong, we are blasted by our own people. The reason that I have so few errors in the series that I've done is because I learned in 10 years of debating on Usenet at talk.org and some places like that if you don't get all your information right, the creationists will usually miss it completely because they're not actually reading what you're saying or paying attention or following along anyway. They're preparing what they're going to say, and they're just going to wait for you to stop making noise come out of your face before they say it. Okay? But if you get any of your details wrong, your own allies, as you would call them on the science side, are going to be the ones that jump on you immediately to point out every single little teeny error you got wrong. Like, for example,
well, I was going to say the ones that spring to mind that creationists always use to sort of like show some great conspiracy in science are Piltdown Man, Nebraskan Man, and Haeckel's embryos. And what I found interesting is that all of those frauds, or not frauds, mistakes, well, one was a total fraud, were exposed by scientists and science.
Yes. Well, actually, two of them were actually frauds. Haeckel was just not a very good scientist. He was a great artist, but he didn't see the reason why you couldn't embellish things, and so he was incompetent as a scientist. And he admitted that he had embellished his drawings to better convey this idea he wanted to present, and didn't, I don't think, understand why the scientific community reeled against that. He didn't understand that even was a hoax. It's unforgivable from my perspective, but from his, that he didn't get that. Now the Piltdown thing, obviously we all know that was a fraud. It's often said that it was a fraud perpetrated by the scientific community when obviously it was perpetrated against the scientific community, and it was the scientific community who overturned that. Curiously, when everybody says that the entire global scientific community bought into that, they're forgetting the curator of the American Museum of Natural History, who never bought the Piltdown thing and only presented those fossils as a mixture of human and ape fossils. And this, coincidentally, decades before Piltdown was exposed as a fraud, this same guy, whose name escapes me at the moment, was the very one who found a pig's tooth and mistook it for a human tooth, and the entire global scientific community rejected his claim immediately and forced him to go out and find more evidence. And after 5 years, when he failed to do so, he finally owed up and said, you know what, I guess you're all right, this isn't a human tooth after all, and he admitted it.
Yeah. On that note, let's introduce the next caller. It's Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hey, Rick, I just want to say thanks for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
The question I had, I guess it's sort of a two-part question, is I was not brought up religious or anything like that. I believe in evolution and that whole bit. I am still, I guess, initially, I'm not sure on the existence of God or not. And I sometimes get into conversations with other people where I classify myself as a non-believer, and very often that's not good enough for them. Oh, well, are you an atheist? No. And I was just wondering, what do you think the best way is to accurately describe my position to them, so it would seem, I guess, good enough for them?
Before we go any further, what is it that you actually believe when you say you...
No, I think that was part of what we needed to do. Let concordance go.
Let me tell you the term I like the most. I know that Aaron has a favorite, but mine has always been religious skeptic. In other words, I am skeptical about claims regarding religious issues. That means that I apply a particular burden of proof. Now, yeah, you got to explain that to people, and that's no little task. But it says that you are open, not that you have achieved or decided at a conclusion, but that you're questioning. So I'm skeptical about claims of religion. It's a little bit different, but honestly, it's what most atheists really consider themselves as, and it's just a question of names. I quite like being a religious skeptic. That means I would certainly change my mind if strong evidence were presented to me. Just like most people who would describe themselves as weak atheists, they take a position on the question of whether or not God exists that is skeptical, that depends on evidence.
Okay.
Go ahead, Aaron. Let's hear it.
Okay. Are you convinced that one or more beings that fit the description or the definition of a deity, are you convinced that one or more of these things certainly must exist?
No, I'm not.
Okay, then you are an atheist. Problem solved.
Okay, right. But going on what Concordant said, he classified himself as a religious skeptic. Now, wouldn't it be better to classify yourself as a skeptic in general? Because classifying yourself as a religious skeptic gives off the impression that you're only skeptical about religion and about everything else. Would it be easier just to say you're a skeptic about everything?
I would have said, before a year ago, I would have said yes. However, this point was brought up at the last TAM, the amazing meeting that I attended in Las Vegas. There were people there who were declaring themselves to be skeptics, but they made the exception that they were skeptic in all but their religious beliefs. Whether they were theists or deists, they held to the belief in a God, and they were skeptical of all other things. But there were enough of them there that at the beginning of that meeting, they made an announcement to everybody to not badger or ridicule belief in deities specifically, that we were allowed at the meeting to be skeptical of every other thing, but not that.
Yeah.
So if Concordance wants to say, no, I'm a skeptic of that too, and that's basically what he's saying there.
Can I just ask about that particular use of the word, because I personally don't like it. Skeptic, to me, certainly as it's understood here, has certain negative connotations that, although the dictionary definition doesn't include it, it suggests a sort of closed-mindedness, and that's why I'm not particularly happy with that word. But maybe it has a different sort of it's understood in a different way in America, I don't know.
Well, here in America, we were taught that you had to say the word skeptic with a sneer in your voice, because skeptics and critics and unbelievers were all equally negative and reprehensible.
So it has a similar negative connotation. I just wonder why, the skeptics organisations and people that use that word in their title actually do so because of that negative connotation. It doesn't seem to be a good PR job.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to wrest the word back from the way we've been raised to think of it.
Well, Eric, would you want to
skepticism is a process, and that's for me, a higher priority than the conclusions it leads me to. That I'm consistent in my logic in all areas of my life. And so atheism says that I've reached some conclusion. And I understand what you mean, DPR, and that's why any word you come up with, though, you're going to have to deal with the associations, unless you make up your own, in which case people have no idea what you're talking about. And this is something, Aaron and you and I have talked about numerous times, but for me, the highest priority in my own particular presentation of how I present myself, I want people to understand that it's because I have a commitment to not truth, but to evidence, right? That's why I suspend judgment on certain issues. And for me, skepticism is suspending judgment on something until you have sufficient proof to commit either way. So calling myself agnostic makes it sound like, well, I'm not really sure, when in fact I'm staying at the default position until someone can convince me otherwise through the use of evidence. And it says so much more to me personally. It makes me feel a lot more fulfilled that I've conveyed my position, even if the other person isn't really picking it up. So it's really a word for me more than it is for the person I'm talking to.
Now, see, on the point that you were talking about where you said you call yourself agnostic for this reason, there are a lot of people that use the word agnostic as an intermediate term to just say, well, I don't know if there's a God or not, but that's not what agnostic means. And the problem that I have, the reason I openly declare myself to be an atheist, and that's the word I tend to use by preference now, is because I've been trained all my life, been fed these lies by the society in which I live, that an agnostic is someone who doesn't know if he believes in a God or not, and that's a ridiculous thing. But then an atheist is someone who knows for certain that there is no God. Now, both of these definitions are, in fact, lies. An agnostic means they have no knowledge of God. They don't believe that it is possible for man to know any of the particulars about a God. Even if you believe there is a God, how would you know which one it is? How would you know what that God wants, or any of the properties that people so commonly claim to know from some inner revelation, especially since everybody's inner revelation contradicts everybody else's? So an agnostic says you can't know any of these details about God. No man, no mortal can know these things, and I accept that. So I am an agnostic. I'm also an atheist because my worldview does not include a God. That does not mean I know that there's no God. It means that I don't believe. That means, another way to put it, because I would always try to reverse it, well, if you don't believe, that means you have a non-belief, which is the same thing as a belief in the negative. It's such stupid semantics. It means that I am not convinced that there is a God. Do I have an open mind out of it? Sure. If you show me a reason, I'll change my mind. Show me a reason and make it a compelling one, and I'll change my mind. Otherwise, I am not convinced, and no, you can't reverse that to where I have a belief in my non-belief.
And I think you could kind of conclude all this by saying that whoever you're talking to will decide whatever they want. I mean, they're going to come up with something. If you say anything other than Christian, they're going to assume that you're some horrible person who sacrifices goats under the pale moonlight and eats babies for breakfast. But I think you almost have to come up with something that makes you feel good. Something that you can live with and that conveys, at least in your own head, what you mean. You disagree, Aaron?
Eric?
Yeah. So, I mean, for a long time, I just described myself as a non-believer because, I guess like the question I asked, I was I'm very convinced that there isn't a God, which classifies myself as atheist. But the reason why I didn't, the threat of atheism over me when I was talking to people was because when people hear atheist, they instantly judge you on every sort of, and on everything, really. So I tried to use the term non-believer just to soften the blow a little bit. And I guess what I came here was just looking for another term.